If they had any pictures of themselves with like a tiger, whether they were in Thailand, immediate fucking left.
That's
I have
pretty
no
random.
interest in
It's
like,
pretty random.
oh, but it was so many guys. There's so many guys. It's like this was in San Francisco. The amount of guys who had pictures with themselves and tigers in Thailand is like being on dating apps in Wisconsin, guys holding their fish, which is also a lot.
Look at my muskie. Welcome, You Need to Listen podcast. She is Kristen Bry, who first of all, I love having conversations with you. You see her in the afternoons, you hear her in the afternoons. What's that show? Spanning the State, I think they call it, which is not the best name for a show. Can I say that honestly?
You can say that honestly.
It's not the best name for a show.
I've said that very honestly. I don't know if I've said it publicly honestly, but I've said it not the best name.
Yes, and my show is also not the best name show.
Political
Power Hour in the mornings, 9 to 10.
At least it's very apt. It is an hour.
Yeah, it is apt. Good use of the word apt.
It's 9 to 10.
It goes
you
quick.
do talk a lot about politics.
I do, but I there's so much more I want to talk about, and that's sort of why we have this.
Exactly.
So
This is a podcast that bridges generational gender and ideology.
And probably more than that. We just probably haven't discovered that yet. We're only in episode 3.
That's true. Episode 3. Welcome.
Well,
tomorrow,
yes.
Well, at least we're recording this previously, but when this drops, it'll be the day before Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Also known as I think it's Galentine's Day. I think Galentine's Day is the
right.
day before.
Now, we both have Valentines.
We do both have Valentines. We're both happily
you're
married. Are you guys a big Valentine's Day
Not at
family?
all.
Neither are we.
I might get flowers.
Mike's more romantic than I am in general, and so I have zero expectations for stuff like this. But so if he drops the ball, there's never like, oh my God, it was Valentine's Day.
You wouldn't be mad.
No.
What about a card?
He's a big card giver. So I would probably, I always feel bad because he probably will get me a card and I will forget.
I'm trying to think if Kathy actually gets me a card, because she's big on the cards. First of all, she's exquisite handwriting, which
another lost art.
Yes.
I have terrible handwriting.
What's the thing? Calligraphy. Brilliant. She does wedding invitations. That's like a whole nother level.
That is a whole other level of
I scribble.
handwriting.
I can't read my own writing. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk about relationships.
Marriage.
Because we're both
I'm
happily
much
married.
more recently married. I'm
I'm
2.5 years.
And I have 40 years this year, which is mind-boggling.
And how long were you guys together before you got married?
It's an interesting story because we
knew each other
in high school, but we didn't date till like my senior year of college. She had boyfriends.
Yeah.
I had girlfriends. Some.
So how long did you date before you got married?
Oh, a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you've been together less than 45, married 40.
Still a big number.
It's a huge number. I'm not taking anything away from it, but I always think of it because I have parents who have been dating since they were 15 or 16. And so their dating anniversary versus like how many years they've been together is basically 9 more than they've been married, right?
Forever.
So it's just, and so that's why I asked, since you knew each other in high
So
school.
since we're talking about relationships, marriage relationships, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, what is the best thing about your marriage relationship?
Oh, but this is I feel like within 2.5 years, we're still kind of in the honeymoon stage. I think I lucked out as far as I met my perfect match, but I think I also didn't get married until I was 36 and I'm his second marriage. Yes. And so I think it kind of, as far as where we're going to go for today's podcast of talking about the state of modern marriage is a lot of the themes that we're going to talk about applied to me until I happened to meet Mike. And so I think my favorite thing about our marriage is I finally met someone who balances me in almost every way possible, as far as in my temperament, we'll say, in my emotional volatility. That is a real thing. I've never been with anyone who can even me out the way that he can and complements my strengths, but also makes up for my weaknesses. Like we are very yin and yang. Not that we're opposites, but as far as like how we fit together is still almost 5 years in of dating. Like it still kind of like throws me sometimes. I'm like, God, it's just like, it just works. Because I had a lot of relationships that did not.
I should have Kathy calligraphy what you just said. You can put it in a card, and that's your Valentine's Day.
Perfect.
That's like the best. For me, and it's sort of the same thing. Kathy makes me smarter.
Yeah.
She makes me kinder. She sort of calms me, even though sometimes she can rile me up, which I guess is a common thing in marriage, especially in 40 years. But that sort of extra that you get from that has nothing to do with all the other things of marriage that we're going to get to. And frankly, I really want to talk about the whole online thing because I spent some time this week talking to younger people, younger than you. And you're only, what, 36?
I'm 38.
Are you 38?
I'll be 39 in June.
My oldest daughter's 38, Katie. They have very different answers, even in their generation, about online dating and how that factors in all this stuff. I was sort of surprised. Now, let me give you my take on this.
On online dating?
Yeah, so not a fan.
Different than social media.
Yeah. I'm not a fan, but I understand people want to do it. I think that's sort of this new reality. I think there's a lot of deficiencies in that setup, but
You think there's more deficiencies in online dating than there was in just rolling the dice at the bar?
yes,
Okay.
because rolling the dice at a bar, to use your term, is actually a face-to-face,
That is true.
a full vetting of the person.
But I don't know if it's more efficient.
Well, I don't know that. I guess
that
how
was the word
how
that
would
you
you judge
used.
that? Because I would say that the divorce rate was lower. It's higher
Well,
now.
first of all, the divorce rate was also have at a time when women have only been able to get credit cards since 1974.
Right. We can make this about equal rights if you'd like.
Yes. Well, this is the thing as far as like the correlating data as far as what how divorce rates has gone, how the delaying of marriage has gone. Like a lot of it also has come from the fact that women could make their own money and did not have to get married in order to like have a status in life.
We were talking about this earlier. Wasn't it like 50+% of marriages end up in divorce or something like that?
Brian said that earlier,
Yeah.
and I didn't know. Sometimes I was like, "Where are these stats?" Because
That's
then he was saying
insane.
that it was also the divorce rate was the lowest for straight couples, the next lowest for gay male couples, and then the highest for lesbian couples. But I did not see. This is my thing. Until I see that data,
Yeah.
I feel bad even repeating that because I was like, I need to see the.
This is what I love about the podcast, because you want to be driven by data. I've looked at all the data, but I don't want the data to drive this conversation. So that's, I think, where we sort of differentiate on this.
Well, no, I feel like that is having the information to say what's sparking the conversation is important, and being able to have some of that feed the argument.
Let me make it an easier argument. It's like doing homework versus doing a live presentation in class. I'm ready for the live presentation in
Okay.
class. I don't want to revisit my homework.
See, I had a lot to do today, so I don't know if I feel like
Very
I'm ready for the
busy.
live presentation.
Do you think, let's talk about relationships, because that's really what this is. Valentine's Day is about relationships.
It's about relationships. Or you want to talk about relationships as a whole or marriage?
Marriage, because I want to sort of get a big chunk of this to talk about the way that people meet and the way they hook up and eventually get married.
Okay.
So, real life, you won't be surprised. I said my second youngest brother met his now wife on Match.com. Early days of Match.com. I think they've been married for like 15 years now.
Web browser version.
Yeah. So I was talking to some of my young teammates today, and the current, is iteration the right word? Of all these different... Iteration, yes. Of all of these apps, I mean, there's like a smorgasbord.
And there's also like the Farmers Only app. There's like you can
Yeah.
get into demographics.
What would that be like exactly, the Farmers app?
I mean, it's like Farmer Wants a Wife. It's like it's the show. It's just
Yeah, well, I don't watch reality
It's either
TV, so-
farmers or people who are ready to be in the farming lifestyle.
So you have to you have to be in it or want to be in it.
Or be like ready to be like, I am going to marry someone who works a farm, so I know what I'm getting into, as I will also be part of the family that works the farm.
So it's less about how hot they are.
Oh no, I don't think that. I think that's
Still the hot part.
because I think it takes, by being on an app that's like that. It's like there's a conservative. I mean, I don't know. I've never been on it, but there's like a conservative. It's the right stuff or whatever, and that's
Good
the guy.
name.
Well, it's a good name, but it's also the guy who started it. Was in Trump's 1.0. He's like one of the guys in Project 2025. That's a whole other social
Married
media
4 times.
yeah, rabbit hole. But I mean, Mike and I met on a dating app,
Yeah.
and we're doing great.
Instant positive reaction to his profile.
Yes. I mean, I think so.
'Cause it's
I
just
think
about
I was,
looks.
But it was just about looks. I mean, I'll be totally honest. The fact that in his profile it said he was 6'3" didn't hurt.
So it's a height thing.
I'm at 5'10". It's kind of a height thing.
So you would never date a guy that was like 5'7".
I have not dated a guy who was 5'7". I have dated guys who are my height.
Which is actually the average height for men.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have not been like, oh, they have to be above 6'2".
But you never go Tom Cruise height.
But I have never been, if I'm being totally honest, I have never been attracted enough to a guy who's been shorter than me that is escalated.
So you discriminate against men of lower than average heights, even though they might be brilliant, funny.
I would say if they were brilliant and funny to overcompensate for that, then I would have considered it.
So you've been in these platforms. I have not been in these platforms. You tell me, are they working for America's? Because all the stuff you sent me and the stuff I read said it ain't working.
Well, it's working as far as like something like 60% of marriages are people that met online.
Yeah.
So as far it's surpassed almost every other way as far as how people meet each other now, right? Like if you look at decade by decade, a long time ago, like it was people you went to high school with or college with or through friends at bars, and the line charts have changed
Like
over
real
time.
life.
And now it is largely online. And I understand the thing that is wild about online dating is as soon as you break up with someone or you get ghosted or you lose interest, the ability to just fire up an app and start immediately looking at what else is out there, I think is what changes the idea of making something like maybe trying again or working harder, or it certainly makes it easier to cheat. But especially, and if you live in because when I was on the apps, because when I met Mike on Hinge, we basically started dating right away. So like this mid-level sized city of Milwaukee, I don't have as much experience with beyond my friends who've been on them. But I was on it in like San Francisco or New York, and I'm sure it's a similar experience in LA or Chicago where there's just a lot of people. And you get exposed to how many people are on these apps, especially as you have less filters on height and age and everything.
True or false? Most of these apps, this is just me not knowing about the apps in any great detail other than I know they exist. It's really about the attraction more than anything else at the beginning, right? How you think they look, if that appeals to you, that's where it starts. Or does all those characteristics matter more than that?
I mean, it's certainly where it starts is like, do I think this? Well, this is the thing that is interesting because, as you might imagine, if you are a pretty girl, you get a lot of swipes. Like
Just
a lot
like
of people
real
are
life,
swiping right.
pretty
Yes.
women get attention.
And so I know men who their how they approach the apps is they just swipe right on everyone. And then once they've matched with someone is when they discern whether or not they want to keep talking to that person or not, which is not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to, but yes. So it's a, do I find this person attractive? And then you kind of look at their profile. And I think for me, I would look and see like, do they seem funny? If they had any pictures of themselves with like a tiger, whether they were in Thailand, immediate fucking left.
That's
I have
pretty
no
random.
interest in
It's
like,
pretty random.
oh, but it was so many guys. There's so many guys. It's like this was in San Francisco. The amount of guys who had pictures with themselves and tigers in Thailand is like being on dating apps in Wisconsin, guys holding their fish, which is also a lot.
Look at my muskie. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Or their deer or whatever hunting thing. The amount of guys on dating apps in this state showing off something they killed is a lot.
Let me go back.
Okay.
To when I remember dating, which is 40 plus years ago, 44 years ago. You met at bars, restaurants.
Met through friends.
Yeah, through friends. But there was across the room stuff. It happened all the time. I love that dynamic. To be honest, completely honest, I lived in that world because this was the disco era. I mean, you saw somebody, 2 minutes later, you're dancing with them, and I'm not a good dancer, but that wasn't the
Good singer though.
A good singer, talented singer. I don't know, good, but talented.
What's the difference between talented and good?
I think there's a nuance to that. Maybe someday you'll understand.
Oh, okay.
So that was my reality. But what I think what's changed is that sort of in-person dynamic builds a stronger one. It certainly builds better communication skills between a man and a woman. But two, I think it gives you a deeper understanding of the person that you are trying to connect with, where an online app doesn't do that at all.
Well, the online app is how you meet someone, and you still have to meet in person and see if that chemistry is there.
But how much, I've heard examples where people were just talking online for like months before meeting. Often this long distance stuff happens all the time.
Long distance stuff happens. But all right, so the bigger point that because the thing that we're burying the lead a little bit as far as people are getting married later and they're getting married less.
Yeah.
And so like the state of marriage in not even our country, but across the world is people are getting married less. And some point to the dating app thing as far as being more isolated and not being, in general, younger generations are more isolated than we used to be. That's a loneliness epidemic that we know about.
And getting worse.
But I also think that there's some arguments as far as the economic promise of what marriage was, right? Because that's shifted over time, right? Like marriage is not always about for most of time has not been about being with your soulmate. It was like, clans making promises of like, here's my daughter, marry her,
Yeah.
as far as like
so she's taken care of.
so she's taken care of, but also like an alliance between our two tribes or our kingdoms or whatever. And it was not about being in love. And like in some in certain countries, there's still
arranged marriages. Yeah.
As far as like we come from similar sized families or similar families as far as what we believe in, what our values are, and you learn to love each other. And it's a very recent, and like for a long time, women couldn't be economically viable on their own, right? And so the fact that it's a more recent development that we marry for love and we put this pressure on finding the like perfect person. And I would say, speaking for you, that like we're in the luckier realm of people who feel like they've met their perfect match or like where it really works.
Well,
but
dare I say equal relationships.
But I think that there is a shift also in that, and this is why I think if we're going to take it political, there is this conservative movement because with women's liberation and women's options, they're becoming pickier. And like men, I'm sorry, aren't keeping up. Like they're not keeping up with the expectations of matching women in education, matching women as far as like making similar amounts of money. And then also the fact that you hear lots of stories once you start having girlfriends who are both working and moms. And this is not true for our family. That they're like, well, that doesn't sound great either because I just have to do everything.
Guy sits on the couch. He asks you like,
yeah, like we both work 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, and yet like I'm the default parent. And so there's like more people being like, well, maybe I don't want to do this.
So I raised this issue, and I call them basement dwellers. You could call them knuckle draggers if you want. Guys who just want to pretend it's like, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and they don't want to do anything. They're married now. She can do that work. And
I wanted to marry my mom.
Yeah, or that, yeah.
I want to be mothered for the rest of my life.
But one of my sort of interviews that I did pre-podcast, one of the individuals said to me, you know what? Maybe this is a byproduct of some women, not all, putting men down and using terms like toxic masculinity, even though that not necessarily fits, but those type of things. And maybe young men, in this case, I was talking to a young man, we don't feel confident that we can walk into a situation and have a conversation with women in public without just getting beat down. I think you have to at least respect that opinion.
I'm sorry, but women have not been feeling confident for
Right.
like the eons of time as
I'm
far
just
as
talking
like
about
you're
the male
not tall, you're not
perspective.
thin enough, you're not pretty enough,
I
you're not
get it.
enough, da 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 da. So it's like I don't really have a lot of patience for some young man who's like, I don't feel confident
You don't see
enough.
the point at all.
What, that he doesn't feel confident enough to approach a woman?
He wasn't talking about just himself. He said, we were talking about the concept of these basement dwellers, how they don't go outside, they don't go to public places to meet women because they don't feel confident enough to get past all of that stuff. They feel like they're being put down. Now, I don't buy necessarily any of that stuff because just be a man and grow up and just get out there, right? I mean, what's the big deal? The worst thing that can happen to you in a conversation is someone walks away. Whatever the conversation, you can
Unless
walk
you're a woman, because then sometimes you get killed.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is what I'm talking about. It's like, oh, like the biggest.
I'm talking from a male perspective.
But this is the thing. The biggest fear of a man is that he's going to be laughed at by a woman.
Right.
The biggest fear for a woman is that she's going to be fucking killed.
Yeah, exactly.
And that
I'm not
happens as
disagreeing.
far as like women turning men down on like the subway or the dance floor. Like one of the biggest threats to women, and this is getting off the topic a little bit, but one of the biggest threats to women in their lifetime is a man.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, go 100 years back, happened all the time.
Yes.
And with
Not even 100 years back. I mean, think about
with
like
literally no punishment.
Yes. And so, I mean, it wasn't how recently can you just like rape your wife? And it was like, nah, it's your property.
Yeah. I didn't know we were going to get to rape. But
Sorry.
I mean, obviously, I mean, that's
We clearly have clearly the women's studies major in me is coming out today.
absolutely, which is a good thing. That's why we have these conversations. When I look at this stuff, and I do spend some time reading about a lot of different things other than politics, I'm just concerned that I already know communication is suffering. I mean, across every demographic you want to look at, how we relate to each other certainly is something when we talk about whatever those divorce rates are, that's not a healthy situation to be in. And certainly we're a consumer culture. You don't like this woman, I'll divorce her.
Just do the next
But
one.
what happens with that is you get kids now that are a byproduct of that. So if it used to be 20% and now it's 50%, you've got a growing number of children who have divided households or two moms or two dads, whatever it is. That's not necessarily leading to what I think is a healthy culture. That's what concerns me. I would love.
So how do you fix it?
It's a great question. I think what has to happen is, and this is a really big ask from younger generations who frankly don't want to hear from me, which which I'm hoping to fix that because I think we have things to say between generations. You have to sort of step back from this desire to let technology control everything in your life, including how you make relationships work or not work. I think that's a big...
So being off apps.
Get off of it. We talked about this in the last podcast. Put your smartphone down. You don't have to consume. It's a healthy thing to get away from it. I think there's always going to be some men that prey on women. That's unfortunate. It's sad. It's horrific. It's sort of a byproduct of what's happened in this world for thousands of years, and I hate it, and I hate being a representative of that side of the gender equation. It pisses me off. And as the father, I said this last time, father of two really smart, awesome young women who are now 38 and 36, which sort of blows my mind when I think about that. All those years have passed, almost as long as I've been married, which makes, do the math, makes sense. But
not a shotgun wedding.
Not a shotgun wedding. I don't even know how my parents would have reacted to shotgun
but that
weddings.
Also
That's even
has
common
changed,
now.
But this is the thing. It's like the things that have changed as far as leading to less marriage is also some of the things that, like, are we going to argue that they're not better? Because there used to be an expectation that if you got someone pregnant, you got married, whether or not you guys were compatible.
Right.
The expectation that, like, it was really hard to leave if you were not compatible. And, you know, a big thing being contraception, right? And being able to...
Women have that power.
And so it's like, do we want to go back to a place? Because, like, it feels like when we look backwards and we see the reasons why people were marrying more often and they were staying married, the underlying conclusion was it's when women had less choices.
Right.
So it's like that what we're going back to?
Well, it's interesting because you raised the idea, I think it's natalism, right?
Pronatalism.
Yeah, where you are encouraging people to have a million kids and as many kids as you can possibly have. And we're seeing sort of the rise of this movement, if you want to call
Elon
it that,
Musk,
tied
baby.
to, well, Elon Musk, what does he have, 9?
He has 12.
12 kids.
At least 12.
And not to point out
Not a lot of them talk to him.
Not to point out one former Wisconsin congressman, but Sean Duffy somehow tied that concept to Department of Transportation funding. And I watched a video that you did recently, which was brilliant. I don't see the connection there unless you're trying to say something about rural life and making it easy for those folks to get around because they've been ignored. I don't get the argument.
I don't get the argument either as far as, and I don't know if it will hold up. The only thing, so here's the thing. So what they removed was anyone with like vaccine or mandate, any kind of mandates as far as vaccine or masks and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what counties and states are still doing that, but whatever. And he's replaced it now with places that have higher, and I don't know what the point is. Is the point to incentivize people? Is the point to reward people who have higher kids? Is it that much bigger of a discrepancy between areas that have high birth rates and what their transportation needs are? Like, that's a whole other thing. But like, is this where we're going? Because JD Vance, very pro-birth. Elon Musk, very pro-birth. Like, this is an administration that very much feeds into the idea that our declining birth rates is an existential crisis.
Yeah, it is. It's a real thing.
And I think as most capitalists would argue that, like, more babies is good babies, or more babies the better, because those are workers, those are consumers, those are people who feed the machine.
Will actually pay into our tax system so that the oldies like me can actually, survive through the next 10 or 20 years. The story gets
good
better.
Luck with that.
Huh?
I don't know if there's going to be enough people to take care of you guys.
Should I be worried about
save
my shekels?
I don't know. Like, things look bleak right now.
You made a great point, though. This sort of idea, and I think it's just an idea right now, where we're going to return to some glory days of family life where it's like it was in, I'll just choose the 1950s, happy days, 1950s. A representation of what the 50s were like.
For white people.
For white people. A lot of people did not have that reality in the 50s, but
Yes.
that's what TV characterized it at. I call it the return to Pleasantville. If you saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Where everybody's white, they're always well dressed. Life is good. They're baking apple pies. The mom's got an apron on. That shit's not real. So if you think we're gonna return to that, you are living in a fairy tale world. And I'll question you if you're living in that kind of reality or think that's going to be the reality. I'm not going to trust you to do anything of significance at a governmental level because I think you're an idiot. I can't say it any clearer than that. What are you doing?
But I also just think, like, if the goal is to have people, like, the reason why the baby boom happened, right, is because all of a sudden the GI Bill, for white families, there was a lot of incentives to feel like you could have the American dream,
well,
right?
You could also
buy a
afford
house,
it.
you could afford it. There was packages to feel like I can afford to have kids. We feel safe. We feel secure. And, like, if anything, if they're really trying to increase marriage, increase birth rates, having more programs that make people feel safe and secure versus like, I don't know what's going to happen in the world, because that's where people are like, I'm not bringing kids into this world.
I love the safe and secure comment because it touches on everything, right? The ability to somehow take care of your kids and still have a life, still work
and
outside
make sure
the
your
home.
kids are doing better than you, which is not the case anymore.
Safe and secure. This is where we failed miserably. Safe and secure in our schools. Yeah. So you can send your kids. You have a young daughter. I had daughters, and I always feel one of the saddest days of my life was the day of the Sandy Hook shooting. And I'll never forget the day I pounded my steering wheel driving I was going up north, and I was just so pissed off that something like that could happen in our country. So if we're going to talk about safety and security, let's really talk about it and not make these fictional things where we think we're doing that, but we're not. We're making ourselves feel good. We let guns proliferate in this country with no rules because we have a Second Amendment. Stupid. There's limits to everything. I don't care what the Constitutional Amendment says, and I'm a gun owner. I go hunting. I use those weapons. I fire them. But there's no way that we should not protect, make our schools safe and secure so that those things can be a reality. That goes for kids. It goes for women in relationships. It goes for all of that. We've talked, I'm not even going to say we talked a good game because we haven't. We have let people down, and this is supposed to be the smartest country on the planet. Is it? When we
That's the first time I've ever heard you admit that maybe,
because I love this country.
The United States is not the very best country in the world.
It's hard to admit, but I see these things, and again, going back to the Sandy Hook day, I'll never forget that day because it changed my life in a positive way. Because I said I got to do something against it. So I've talked about it. I've gone around the country and did speaking engagements because I felt it was important. But when I see my Republican friends, and I'm a Republican, I always tell people that. I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter. That doesn't matter. That's one person who's going to be gone at some point. I'm a Republican because I believe in small government, real small government, not Elon Musk's version, not Donald Trump's version, but actually real fiscal responsibility. I know it's sort of a lecture, but it pisses me off that we've dumbed down all this stuff, whatever we're talking about, to the point where we can't have a serious conversation about it. It's stupid.
Where we were talking about marriage rates.
We were.
Which feels like a very far cry from where we
But
ended
it's not really, because everything's connected. You know this.
I know this.
We read a lot. We talk a lot about this stuff. These are big issues. And I'm so passionate about the fact that at some point, maybe we need a wake-up call, and I don't know what that would be, as a country, to start understanding all of the stuff that we've lived through. World wars, the rise of women, the power of women, the supposed equality of women. But yet we're still talking about stupid stuff. That pisses me off. That doesn't make any sense.
All right, so your solution to marriage is not to go backwards.
Don't go backwards.
Don't go backwards.
As sexy as that sounds to some people, sexy is not the right word.
Don't go backwards. Put down the technology. Go to a bar.
Hit
on women. Be a man.
You could do the same thing at a church gathering. I'm not a person who doesn't
church gatherings. That's how Miss Rachel met her husband.
I love that.
Yeah. Do you know who Miss Rachel is?
No. Who's Miss Rachel?
She's like the this age Mr. Rogers. She's wonderful.
Really?
She's best.
Well, how old?
Probably my age.
Okay.
She's wonderful.
That's probably why I haven't paid attention to her.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised none of your grandkids watch her.
They might.
Your daughters definitely know who Miss Rachel is.
I will say this. I just talked about American being dumb. The dumbification of our consumption of TV continues.
Are you opening another topic?
I'm teasing a future topic because I want to get to really dig into reality TV because I think it's poisoned our culture. Poison our culture. Kristen Bry.
All right.
This has been a blast. Did you see I was actually sweaty?
Are you sweating right now?
A little sweat, yeah.
Okay.
Because here's what I love about doing the podcast. You push me. When you're doing a show by yourself, you have a tag team partner. I do it by myself. I miss the engagement and the push.
Well, you have guests.
I do.
But you're usually asking the questions instead of making
my guests
points
aren't
that your
necessarily.
Your guests are like, this is why you're wrong.
Under that Bill McCoshen pushing my buttons a few times. That's about the only guy that does that.
You think Bill listens to this podcast?
I'm going to demand that he listens to this podcast because I think everyone should listen to this podcast because it's unique. We talked about this last week.
Unique.
It's a very unique podcast.
The You Need to Listen podcast. If you made it this far, please rate us. Please press subscribe if it's on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to us.
Keep watching.
And keep listening. Keep watching. Find us on social medias. I'm at Kristen Bry on everything. Brey.
You are on everything.
I am on everything.
I'm just on Threads and Instagram.
And what is it? OC Steve Scafidi?
OC Scafidi. Last name. 2 F's, 1 D.
OC Scafidi.
Did you just got that?
him. Look at him.
Closing thought.
Okay.
Thanks for making me smarter.
Thanks for making me smarter, Steve.
I love that.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you and everybody out there.
See ya.
Buy some chocolate.